This is AutoSave, the podcast for video game nerds. It is a book club for video games where we go chapter by chapter through the video games we love, and we are loving Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as we continue our dive through the game and are heading into the Golden Saucer, the Vegas of Final Fantasy. Plus, we are joined by Simon Bushell from Open Era Podcast, and he's a resident Final Fantasy VII fan. So stay tuned right here on AutoSave to hear what he has to say. Hello and welcome to AutoSave. I'm Camille Salazar-Hadaway here with my co-host, Mr. Nick Andrade. And as we continue our deep dive into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I'd like to say today we have another guest. What are we doing here? 2 guests in a series? Who are we? I would like to introduce fellow podcaster and FF7 fan, Simon Bushell. Hello, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I am a fan of AutoSave, so it's as part of a sister podcast in the network as well. It's always nice to have a bit of crossover, so I'm glad to be here.
I'm just glad I'm here with someone else that needs to put up with Nick. That's what I'm happy about. But we're gonna have to talk more because first we need to recap what happened on last week's episode.
This about her? About Marlene?
Corel wasn't much. Decent place with decent coal. Decent folks, too. Rough around the edges, but big hearts. Salt of the earth. And I sold them all down the river.
We headed to the mountains, specifically Mount Corel, and we continue to follow the shadowy figures, or black cloaks as Nick likes to call them, while on our journey as we continue to find out about Barrett's backstory. And we learn a lot more about it because we explore his hometown and learn that, well, even though we may like him, not everyone in his town likes him. No, he is not a popular guy at all. And we find out from Barrett, it's all because he encouraged the town to sell the mine that they are known for mining, their mining town, to Shinra, and for Shinra to build a reactor, which inevitably led to the downfall of the town as Shinra burned down the town and pretty much killed a bunch of people. It took a turn for the worse very quickly. We also know that some of those people that died in that catastrophe also included Marlene's dad. And we learned a little bit more about the Black Cloaks as the doctor in the town theorized that they were ex-Shinra troops. And we found out they're heading to the Golden Saucer. So you know what that means? We're going to head there too. But first, let's hear from Simon, because Simon, you are actually, it's so great to have you here because you have an interesting history with video games. I know that you do Open Era, which is another podcast, a tennis podcast, which you would be surprised that you're such a video game fan, but you also have a prior history as well. Do you want to talk a little bit more about your work at EA?
Yeah, sure. And my sort of day-to-day role as well, my current job, I work for a company named NGX Interactive, where I'm a narrative designer there. We build digital experiences for museums all around the world. So I'm sort of 1 foot still in games, but a lot of like storytelling and narrative stuff that if you go into any art institution or museum around the world, there's a chance that we might have built something in there. As you were saying, like previous to that, I worked at EA Sports for almost 8 years in different capacities. I worked on the gameplay team for FIFA. I also worked on FIFA Mobile for a spell, and I worked in marketing and communications. So yes, I've been in and around the games industry for a long time, so it's always nice to get to talk about stuff in my actual professional career. I never get to talk about anything other than sport in podcasts, so this is a nice change for me.
Well, that's pretty cool that you're bridging sports and gaming together with your experience at EA, but also just as a fan and loving video games. And you know what we like to do here. Nick, you know what we like to do here.
question of the day?
No, not yet. Pause on that. But we like to sometimes put our guests through the ringer. So I'm going to put you through the ringer. Nick, feel free to throw in your answers here. I think we know a lot about you, but I'm still curious to see what you would choose, Nick. So this is what a game I like to call, Are You a True Gamer? Obviously very serious stuff here, Simon and Nick. This is the place where everyone will be judging you based on your answers. Let's start off with the first question. What was your first game, Simon?
That's a really good question. Like first gaming experience. I could say first core memory for me, which would be Pokemon Red on the Game Boy. That would be the one that I would say is really the first time I think I appreciated games. I think I have some core memories of like the BBC system that was much earlier than that. Even the Atari system, which I remember slightly before that, but it's right at the stretching my memory of, I remember a game called Sushi, which is a text game that I played. And that must have been a precursor really long time ago. So, but I'll say Pokemon Red for the ease of convenience here.
Pokemon, Nick.
Yeah.
I see you nodding your head. You're loving that answer.
I think it was Pokemon Blue for me.
Well,
at least
obviously,
core
Nick,
memory-wise.
that was a wrong answer because Simon was right. It's always Pokemon Red. It is always going to be Pokemon Red over Blue. I mean, Charizard.
At the time, though, you didn't know how amazing Charizard was. So for me, I liked the Blue Power Ranger, so I went with Blastoise.
Well, you made the wrong decision for life. You got to live with that. All right, next question. PlayStation, Nintendo, or Xbox? Or, you know what? PC.
Have and always have been a Nintendo fanboy. I love their design. I've always loved their characters and their side of things. I am fortunate enough as someone who loves this industry to own all systems at this point, so I don't really have a pick when it comes to that side of things, but I was always a Nintendo guy growing up.
All right. Okay. And I'm going to ask you, what was your favorite video game, like the best video game ever made? Their favorite experience in a video game. Nick, I feel like yours is Pokemon, right? That's fair. Like Pokemon.
Of all time?
Well, maybe Final Fantasy, eh?
That's putting me on the spot there. I don't even know.
All right. Well, we'll pause on you and I'll put Simon on the spot. Simon, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's such a tricky one because I think that changes with age as well, of how I appreciate games now versus when I appreciated them as a kid. I think maybe to sort of connect it with FF7, I would say Final Fantasy X probably. It was really my entry into JRPGs, and it was really a like bonding memory for me as me and a friend when I was growing up. I remember going over to his house at the end of the day, and I didn't have a PS2, so I think that was really like the thing that connected us. I remember watching that game and playing through it, and I really loved it. And I think that's really like what connected me with the music of the series as well. So I don't think that 10 is the best game ever. I also don't think it's probably my favorite game, but I would say it's such an influential and important one to me that it's the first one that comes to mind in a conversation like this, at least.
Your answers are so good because I just love how like you're not saying best game ever, but you're saying like the best game for like core memory, which I love. Did you play X2 as well?
Sure did, yeah, and love that dress sphere system. I think it's really
sure did.
It's very underrated. The music in that game is incredible as well. I think Memories of Light and Memory is a fantastic track. I will attempt to hide my nerdiness when it comes to the FF series throughout this podcast, but yes, I did play X2 and really enjoyed it.
I'm glad because I also enjoyed X2, even though people like to rag on it all the time. Nick, I'm going to go back to you. Best game ever.
Best game ever? I would like it's got to be Kingdom Hearts 2 for me.
Okay.
That's the again, Kingdom Hearts has a special place in my heart, and even though there we go. But I mean, when you mention it as a 30-something-year-old that I am now, it's like one of my favorite games ever is, you know, some anime characters basically with a bunch of Disney characters. I think people think I'm weird, but I still love that series.
It doesn't make sense, but you know what? Your answer, I'll appreciate that for you. Of course, mine, without a doubt, Ocarina of Time. The Legend of Zelda franchise is so close to my heart. I cannot get over it, but I won't talk about it more because, Simon, you mentioned your love for Final Fantasy. Could you tell us just a little briefly about your history with game? was your first one, but what is maybe your favorite of the bunch? Are you a Final Fantasy VII like diehard?
It's between 7 and 10, definitely, in terms of which is my favorite. I think 7 is, I think, clearly had the widest reach of this series in terms of its influence on the wider genre and its place in sort of video game history. So I think 7, mostly from a journalistic standpoint, would be the best game in the series and probably would be right up there. 10, obviously, like the sentimental side of things. But my history is, I think I've played every one. I know I have not played 1. It's the only one that I have, and it's on my back burner to play at some point because I have the Pixel Remaster series to play on my phone at some point, and I've never had the chance to go through it, which is just laziness on my behalf. Too many good games to get through. But I think I've played every mainline series. I played a little bit of 14 last year. I'm not a big MMORPG fan, so I never really hooked me in the way. I know that game is excellent, and I know that Yoshi P is beloved in that community. That being said, I'm not a 16 fan, did not enjoy it, so it's kind of put me off a little bit from playing 14. So I think maybe I'll kick things off with a controversial statement and leave it at that. But I think I've played every game in the series. Not a lot of the side ones, but mainly in the numerical mainline ones I've played.
I mean, that is, firstly, like your history with Final Fantasy. It's very hard for even Final Fantasy fans to say that they played almost every single one. You're just missing that one because, like you said, those MMOs sometimes are really rough for fans that are more used to like the story-driven games. You almost gave Nick a heart attack. I think he died actually in the corner when you said...
I've spent probably on 11 and 14 combined, both MMOs, I've spent maybe 400 plus days or more on those games, which is, I don't know if that's sad or whatever. But did you also say 16? You didn't like 16?
I have a really tough time with 16. I think it is got a lot of problems with it that I didn't really respond to. So I know this is not a 16 podcast. Maybe I should hold my tongue here, but it's... I think it is a very well-made game, and I think it is a game which was delivered on time, on budget, on schedule, and I think tried to do a bunch of stuff. And I understand as well from the 16 perspective if it was trying to do new things for the series and push it into a new direction for a younger audience and all those kind of things. It just didn't work for me.
Wow.
You know what, Nick? Hush it, all right? Because you know what?
Yeah.
I'm not the MMO person either, so I'm right there with you. But it's okay. It's great to have different dynamics going into this episode because we all are fans of Final Fantasy. So I got to ask you just 3 more questions. Cloud or Zach, Simon?
Always Cloud. Always Cloud.
Nick?
I know Zach is the sentimental favorite online and all the shipping communities. I've delved into a little bit of that for my sins, but yes, Cloud for me every time.
Nick?
Oh, yeah, Cloud. I agree. It's Cloud.
Yeah, Cloud is the right answer. So I agree with that. Tifa or Aerith?
That is a question I think it has evolved as I've got older.
Go on.
Indeed so. I think the younger, more, what should we say, sexually charged version of me would have been a huge fan of Tifa. I think the older version of me likes Aerith a lot more.
Nick, what are you thinking with that?
Well, no, because I'm a Tifa fanboy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly I haven't gotten over my young adult age. But for me, the reason why, again, especially if you go into this game and remake and Rebirth and you see the relationship play out, you realize that Aerith is in love with Zack still, right? Like this is kind of is her first love that we learned in remake. And so I don't particularly want any competition. So Tifa is in love with Cloud, so I'm in love with Tifa. There you go. Easy peasy.
All right. I'm going to choose Team Tifa as well. And quickly for the last one, would you rather hang out with Chocobo Sam, Madam M, or Andrea?
Let's take Chocobo Sam. Let's go with that. Let's take the easy option here, the easy out. Wrong. Okay. Reasonable. Fair.
Well, one, if you like dancing, Andrea, and then if you like hand massages, then obviously Madame M.
But Nick, you didn't tell us your answer.
You don't need to know my answer.
All right. Okay. Well, you know what? We'll leave those questions as that. I'm going with Chocobo Sam as well because we got the question of the day. The question of the day, mirror fights are very big in video games where you kind of have the protagonist or one of the characters face off against maybe a rival or an enemy. Sometimes they're really close to their abilities or powers, or maybe it's sometimes like themselves as well. What is the most memorable mirror fight in video games or other mediums? Nick, do you want to start?
So mirror fight, like how close do these characters have to be? Like I know we talk about close friends, but there's a lot of characters that face off against each other.
Yeah.
At the same time, right?
Yeah.
I would that's included. Correct?
I would include that. Yeah.
So off the bat, and you already predicted this earlier when we talked about it, is I'm gonna go with Pokemon because I'm a big Pokemon stan. Ash and Gary. To be honest, I think Gary's a piece of shit. Just in my opinion, I think he's always been so mean to Ash, and Ash has been nothing but nice to Gary. Mm-hmm. Especially like he grew up with Professor Oak, and Professor Oak is the nicest guy ever. So I don't understand where Gary gets all his sass from.
Yeah.
But I would say that's one. You can connect those two with Red and Blue because I never really understood in the actual games why they were called Red and Blue, and then they went further into that like lore later on. But also there's a version in Kingdom Hearts, because I'm a big Kingdom Hearts fan, like I said, Sora, not Riku, even though they are rivals, I'm going to go with Vanitas, who looks exactly like Sora and is I can't talk about exactly.
I mean,
how
we'll be here all day if you go into the story of Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts. Please don't. Yeah. Please don't. But yeah, actually, that Sora is really a really good one. Simon, do you have any that you could think of?
Definitely Ken and Ryu was the first one that came to my mind, or Ken and Ryu, as they say in Britain. That one from Street Fighter certainly sticks out to me, along with the Mortal Kombat side of things. So we were mentioning before we started recording, pick any one of the four: Smoke, Scorpion, Sub-Zero. Who am I missing? Reptile? There you go. Any of those ones make sense.
Yeah.
I was also thinking maybe, could you throw Goku and Vegeta potentially as that? I know they're not mirrors, but just in terms of they kind of thematically are in the story, so it kind of works.
That is a perfect example because I would say they are mirrors of each other, just one smarter than the other one, and a better father figure. We could argue about who's the better father between Goku and Vegeta all day, but I think the answer is clear. It's Vegeta's better father.
Controversial opinion.
What? Are you... What?
We'll ask Trunks about that. We'll ask Trunks.
He takes his family on vacation, or at least attends their vacation. Goku's like dead half the time on purpose, and he gave Cell senzu beans to fight his son. I could go on about that, but trust me, it's Vegeta. It's Vegeta. I was thinking more along the lines of Link and Dark Link. That was like the most memorable. I just remember playing Ocarina of Time, and when you go in and you see this tree, and then all of a sudden you realize you have to fight yourself. So that is our mirror fights. I wonder if we're going to see any mirror fights today. Well, usually the question of the day has to do with the episode, so I'm going to say maybe. But let's head in to the Vegas of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the Golden Saucer, and will we get lucky? Well, hopefully Cloud and the crew does, because we need to know what's going on. So we're going to find out if we know more in this episode after the break, right here on AutoSave.
Barrett Wallace, Tifa Lockhart, and Cloud Strife. Look at them. Look! Waltzing around with the flower seller and Hojo's lab rat. Who are these people?
At least they're finally on a real wanted list. It's about time.
That's all well and good, but why am I in charge of handing out the posters? Don't they know I have a division to run?
I think you're where the president wants you.
right, so we see that the Turks are searching for the crew. They have the wanted poster, and Palmer is there, which is weird. It's very weird that we're getting this random cutscene with a board member when it seems like he doesn't even want to be there. Has no interest. He got downgraded to handing out flyers from being a division head, which I find hilarious.
What's with I don't understand the whole wanted list.
Mm-hmm.
We keep going back and forth with this. They were wanted. Roche finds them, is like, actually, I want a super fight with you, Cloud, and then lets him go. And then Rufus is like, you guys are not wanted anymore, but then I guess the assassination attempt makes them wanted criminals again? I'm not entirely sure what's going on with this plot line of these wanted posters, I'll be honest.
Yeah, Simon, we were pretty lost with this because it's like we were tired of this back and forth, Shinra not making their decision on what they wanted to do with the party. Were you filling in the blank very quickly here, or did it take you time to be like, wait a second, why are they wanted again?
Well, I think there's two answers here. The one is that I think it is post-assassination is why they go onto the wanted list, but if you read the poster, it says they are members of Avalanche for blowing up the mako reactor from Sector 7, so it's still the original poster. It hasn't changed from that standpoint. The secondary answer to it is it's a plot device. That's why it's used here. It's the narrative arc which goes over Chapter 8. So there's that reason behind it as well.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, it's to move the story along, and that's what we're going to do, because guess what? The party does arrive at the Golden Saucer, and it is a pretty epic opening. There's dancing, there's laughing, there's lots of muscles and thrusting and hip thrusting and pecs flexing, and it gets really weird quick. But they are welcomed into the Golden Saucer with this, it's kind of like a parade, and I guess like kind of charmed into dancing, which Yuffie is charmed into changing into a pop star in a sense, wearing pop star clothing and dancing along with Aerith and Tifa. And they're all down with it. They're not like, this is weird. They're just down with it. This is definitely setting the stage that we're going to have a good time here.
How do they know so much choreography in this whole game so far? They picked up the rifle dance real quick. And then here we go. You got to get in song and dance? Boom. We got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird.
I think it's really funny that Yuffie is obviously like the one that's picked out, and then Tifa and Aerith immediately in the dance steps, they pick it up almost immediately. So someone's been getting the message. We haven't been because we don't know the steps.
Yeah, or maybe this is just something you learn in school in this world. Like, you know, you're a little kid. They're like, okay, these are the dances of life that you may encounter throughout your life, okay? And then they just learn different dance moves. It's so weird. I could kind of buy if Yuffie was the only one that was dancing, but it's weird that Tifa's dancing. But hey, guess what? I forget about it because we see this character named Dio arrives, and he's kind of like the Hercule of Final Fantasy VII. But he arrives, he has tons of muscles. He has all these backup dancers. They're like doing about 60 hip thrust it and like pecs flex all together in this sequence. What is your initial thoughts on Dio?
Can be fun. I think why on earth is this guy the park director of the Gold Saucer? I have no idea. They don't cover for that in story at any point on this. I think he is just a ton of fun to watch on screen and like to be around as well. He's, don't know. I don't know why he's a big muscly character. They don't say, but he's just very fun to look at and be around. So I'm totally down for it. I wondered actually, thinking back, I was going to do some research before this and ran out of time. You mentioned Hercule, like the Mr. Satan. 1997, were they copying Akira Toriyama straight? Maybe just the original version of it. I don't know that for certain.
I mean, the cape, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I think there might have been that there. You know what? I am a fan of the cape. I'm a fan of the campiness that is there. And apparently Dio's a fan of us because he challenges Cloud to a retro-style fighting game as soon as we arrive. This is the weirdest welcome ever, and we are literally thrown into it. We get this like Punch-Out style polygon game, which is very iconic, I feel like, in the original game as well. I actually have the polygon figures from the action figures from this, and I had a blast with this. What did you think, Nick?
Yeah, this was super fun. Again, we are treated to so many different kind of mini games throughout this journey, I guess. And then now getting to the gold saucer, you're thinking, okay, what are we in store for? And right away, see a naked man just looking at his hairy chest this whole time, being like, wow, like, how did he get his muscles like this? And then you get right into this kind of game style, which I always love when they kind of throw back to the original game where the character designs look like blocky that they did. But this was so much fun, and I hope we get like an extra mini game where you get to play more of this too.
You may be lucky when it comes to that.
I feel I know, right? Yeah. I feel like the funny part about these moments, it's like when you go into like a different type of gameplay, or it's like dance, random character, we're throwing you in there. You have to come out of that. So when you actually you finish this fight, you get a golden ticket and Yuffie's pop star outfit, and Dio welcomes the party. And like him and Cloud kind of do like a, yeah, thanks, man. And it changes back to like a regular cutscene, and Cloud just like walks away. It is so weird. But I automatically forgot about how weird it was when you were out of that moment, because I'm like, oh, let's go explore the golden saucer. It totally distracted me.
I think we're in store for even weirder things moving forward, to be honest.
Yeah, we also hear it's funny because as the team kind of walks into the golden saucer to explore, we hear Aerith actually give a snark remark about Cloud's dancing from the honeybee, and I forgot that no one else saw that but Aerith. I'm hoping they bring in a moment where there's like a dance thing that Cloud has to do,
has to be,
and in front of everyone, because I'm curious to like Barrett's reaction. Like, would Barrett like chime in and be like, all right, I'm here too, I'm your backup dancer? I'm curious about that. All right, well, we do head into the golden saucer, and the group decides that, you know what, why don't we have fun while we're here in the Vegas of Final Fantasy VII? And unfortunately, as Cloud is trying to be convinced by Tifa that they should just vote to have fun, Cloud sees another Sephiroth. And the Sephiroth tells him to go on and enjoy himself while he has time left. This is the weirdest Sephiroth vision that we've seen, or ghost that we've seen, whatever this thing is, because it's not asking Cloud to actually follow him or to join him. It's asking him to be like, you do you, B.
This makes it seem like, all right, this might be the last time Cloud actually can have fun with his friends. So this is why, as a person playing, just have fun in the gold saucer, because after this, it's probably going to be a lot of despair and sadness.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is a bit of a strange one, isn't it? Like, it doesn't serve any sort of narrative, like, forward momentum to the story. It's just kind of like, all right, you're here, have a good time. Because it kind of, like, it bookends with the vote, right, from the group of whether or not who's going to go off and who's going to have a good time. So I guess you could almost say that they work in tandem with each other. But yes, I agree with you. It is a bit of a strange one.
It's weird, too, because one of the things that Nick and I have been discussing here is trying to figure out, so far in the story, what are these visions? Is it Sephiroth actually seeing what Cloud is doing and trying to reach out to him and talk to him? Is this something that, you know, Cloud maybe has embedded in him and they're kind of like echoes of Sephiroth? So it's very confusing to see this one. I just kind of brushed it off as like, okay, this is another thing that they just needed to make sense, you know, quote, that for the story of it all. But I guess, hey, you know what? When that vision happens, the group actually sees that Cloud is not quite himself because he just saw the vision. And of course, he never told anyone that he just saw the vision, which is very, very irritating. Why don't they just talk about it and be transparent? But they decide that Cloud needs to actually go and have maybe a little sleep, a little nap, and the rest of them are going to go and have fun. So they leave him with Barrett to find a hotel, and that's what they do. They find their way through this graveyard, which is pretty much like a haunted hotel, and it has all this theatrics. The first thing I thought is like, why would you want to stay here? Like, a themed hotel, pretty annoying, I feel like, on its own. Then you're adding like a haunted aspect. It's like no good is going to come out of this.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Of why this exists in this space. If you sort of take that Dio as a park director is so over the top, so ridiculously over the top as a character, then it kind of makes sense that the rest of this space is just completely over the top as well. So yeah, from that regard, it's kind of like an interesting little piece as well, because you have that conversation with Cloud and Barrett in the lead up to it, sort of saying that these are all built out of mako. So like it's supposed to be bad, I think. It's supposed to show you that this is kind of superfluous and not essential. And then at the same time, you're looking at it and like, this stuff is all really, really cool in here at the same time. And I really like it. So I think it's kind of toying with you a bit as a player.
When you play the original, I don't feel like you really get a grasp of just how weird everything is until you see it with like really great graphics and an incredible compelling story and voice actors and all that. You realize like, what the hell was I playing back in the day? Because haunted hotels, Dio, like you said, like just so much camp and weirdness that I'm embracing now. But if you look back on it, you're like, what the hell were they almost smoking while they were doing this?
It is so weird. It's so weird. But you're right. It is weird, but they do a good job of making us fall in love with the weird campiness of it all. But then you hear that Barrett is very upset because this is all using up mako, and we see how that hurts places like the slums, right? And the people that are living there, and it's all for things that are just a luxury like this. So it's interesting how they like always chime that in with Barrett's voice. And I like that. But we meet one character that comes out from the grave, Kate Sith. And this is like a cat toy thing. Kate Sith, like, we've played Final Fantasy before, but if you haven't, it's just like a cute character. And again, to Nick's point, you don't realize how weird this character is when you first meet this character, that it's like, oh, what was I playing as a kid? Like, why did I think this made sense? Yes, a cat with a bear toy robot completely
Moogle,
makes
right?
sense. Is it a Moogle? Is it a robot Moogle, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah. But it's different looking than the actual Moogles.
Yeah, it's so weird.
I thought growing up, it may be like, I don't know, 2007. It took me to realize that Kate Sith wasn't the Moogle. And it was the cat. I actually had never noticed.
Yeah.
For a long time, I'm like, and then I think I was playing another Final Fantasy game, and I'm like, Kate Sith was a cat. And I'm like, oh, wait. And then I went back, and I'm like, wow, I never noticed this the entire time.
We were dumb as kids.
Love his Scottish accent too, by the way.
I hate it. I hate that. I hate that. I really hate that they did that. It is so fake. It is so bad. I don't even know. Like, I don't have Scottish friends to like hear them talk all the time, but it just sounds so fake to me. And maybe that's just really naive of me thinking that's not how Scottish people sound like, but it is so bad.
We have a Brit here who can let us know.
I'm kind of scared to answer this question without having looked up the IMDb listing of the person who did it to say whether or not he was Scottish. It sounded passable to me, but that's kind of probably insulting to someone if he was Scottish. It makes it sound bad.
You're like, it's passable. That's fine. All good here. Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I find him very annoying, and I'm very annoyed by Kate Sith. But you know what? Kate's going to help us book some, or wants to actually help. Well, Kate's kind of, I guess, soliciting their services because Kate wants us to find our fortune, or to tell us the truth of our future for the exchange of some gil. And obviously in true Cloud and Barrett fashion, they're not down for it. So they head into the hotel to book a night to stay. But guess what? Everyone is loving the theatrics and campiness of this haunted hotel because it is booked up. And Kate appears again to say, hey, guess what? I'll help you. I'll figure out a way for you to stay. So they hack into the hotel, I guess, booking system and cancel a bunch of reservations so that Barrett and Barrett, Cloud, and Tifa and the whole party could actually stay at the hotel, which is pretty much a W, but I'm already suspicious of Kate at this point. As we head to our room, Kate says that he could answer a question for a fee, again trying to solicit his services to us. And you know what? We bite. Cloud decides to try this out And they're pretty much like fortune cookies, like just very generic things that you could apply to any situation in life. And that's what you get for the first one. I was not taking Kate seriously at this point, but it is the third one that kind of sits with me, as Kate says, seek and you should find, but you will lose what you cherish most. And this immediately takes me to that iconic scene in the original Final Fantasy VII. Is that what Kate is talking about?
I think that is the tension, is it not? Like, and I think that's what both Remake and Rebirth kind of wrestle with themselves, which is will we be able to change the passage of time? Like, we're fighting against this iconic story and this iconic moment that they give you multiple opportunities to try and question whether or not it's going to happen again. And I think this is just another one of those moments. I found this moment really funny because, like, they land on this really poignant final message, but not after they went to 2 first. It's like these first 2 are nonsense, and then you end up with this one, which is supposed to be really poignant, and it is because we know it, but at the same time, it could just be nonsense to Cloud as well in the story.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like, as the players, especially players who've played the original, I'm curious to people who don't know necessarily what happened, if they got the same reaction. But for Cloud, he's kind of in that boat as well. He doesn't know what is going to happen. So it's weird that his reaction is that way as well, as though he already feels like something is off. Like, he feels like he's going to lose something. And maybe it is himself, because he's seeing these visions and he's already trying to drawing similarities between him and the Black Cloaks. I don't know.
He already does seem like he's always sour anyway. So I don't even know if he's being if he's depressed, if he's sad, or if he's just being himself and always, in a bad
It's true,
mood.
but
I don't even know.
And they do dramatize that moment, though, right? In the scene itself, just in terms of how it's shot from the cinematography and the composition standpoint, they make it land with weight. So they do want you to think about it moving forward in the story.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to have to think about it a little more, because we see that the Turks and Palmer actually are trying to check into the same hotel as well. But apparently their bookings was canceled. And I thought this was because of Kate Sith, but it seems like it might actually be because of Palmer, and Palmer canceling the reservations and then wanting to leave. Because he doesn't seem bothered that they can't stay at the hotel. He's just like, yeah, let's go. And the hotel clerk says Palmer called in and canceled the reservation. So that was interesting as well. And then finally, we switch back to Cloud as he goes to sleep. And Barrett tells Cloud to rest and just chill out, because he's not himself. And as Cloud closes his eyes, we switch to Jack. As Cloud closes his eyes, we switch to Zach, but it's not in the way that you'd expect.
Would you care to join us?
Definitely. I'm starved.
You're supposed to say thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
No, you're supposed to say it now.
Thank you. Hey, did someone come by the house last night?
Oh, you must mean Biggs. He was just dropping off some food.
Then what's with the sneaking around?
You've seen those wanted posters all over town? Well, his face is on them.
How do you know him?
I'd rather let him explain. So long as Marlene's here, he'll come around again.
He won't. Biggs isn't coming back. Tifa isn't coming back. Daddy isn't coming back. Nobody's coming back ever again.
Sure they will. And I know just how to prove it to you. I'll go and get Biggs. Right now.
Mean it?
Always do. Honest and true. But... let me guess. You don't like dumb rhymes.
No, I like rhymes sometimes.
Not bad, kid.
So we switch to Zach, but usually when we switch to Zach, we just take control of him in perspective of, the protagonist. But this time we actually see Zach from another perspective. And I'm guessing that is Cloud. It seems like it's Cloud in Zach's world as he's starting to come to. But we see Aerith is still unconscious as well. This is very interesting as then we take control of Zach and he heads down and meets Marlene and Elmira. I was really surprised to see Marlene in this scene and to also learn that Biggs is alive in this universe. What do you make of it?
We didn't get Simon's opinion on what's going on with these timelines.
Well, this is the time we get Simon's opinion. We get Simon's opinion about the timelines because it's been very confusing for us to kind of figure out this switch back and forth. We are not really sure if it's like, is it different universes? Are they connected? Is it that like, because it seems like everyone who should be dead or like almost dead is just coming back in Zach's universe. What do you think when you were at this point of what was happening here within Zach's timeline?
Yeah, they do some interesting stuff here, don't they? Like just when you're playing through it, you have the cracker boxes as well with the dogs on them. So you kind of get a little bit of wayfinding. I think the thing that I noticed at this point was that you sort of have this sort of dual chase sequence, almost like this pseudo dual chase sequence, which has happened, which is Palmer chasing after the group as you land in the gold saucer. And then you also have Zach chasing after Biggs as well. And like the duality of those posters there as well. So it kind of made me connect those two things together. That being said, I think at this point in the story, you still kind of have no idea what's going on, especially with Marlene there as well. It's, other than she's very cute and it's like a really sad scene in that one as well. I think in chapter 8, it does seem reasonable that they're starting to spoon feed you a little bit of what the story is going to be at the back end of this game. I was still quite confused on my first playthrough here. But I think there's enough like breadcrumbs of like things that I was starting to pick up, like obviously the cracker box and then obviously like the parallels to what's going on in the main like timeline, storyline, whatever you want to call it, the A plot of this sequence.
A plot, B plot. Yeah, it's nice that here at least we're getting like little doses, and it seems like, you know, one of our theories was like maybe there is like those canon events, if you will, like that the MCU talks about that have to happen. Aerith, you know, we see Aerith dying or going unconscious. I thought she was dead off the beginning of the game, as maybe being one of those moments. But it seems like in Zach's timeline, or his world, everyone who we think should have died or had to die maybe didn't. Nick, like, were you surprised to see Biggs here or hear of Biggs?
Everyone else is dead though, right? So, and Biggs died.
Are they?
Well, because if you look at Zach's like notepad or whatever, it has the X's in everybody except for Biggs, that we've seen before, and he died in our timeline, let's say, and it was Wedge who survived. So, again, I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. I just want Cloud and Aerith to wake up so then we can have some sort of idea of what's happening from their perspective in this timeline.
I just want, well, Cloud's up, kind of. We just need them to talk and say like if they're aware of what's happening, because I don't know. I think know.
Like, but sorry, I think perspective is such a really interesting question, because the whole framing of this like particular segment is like right at the start. Like it's the only time in gameplay in the whole game that you're not playing in that main character's shoes, and it's such an odd choice. Yeah. Like it's really jarring to you to go from the previous scene into this one, because Zach moves really slowly. Like you're almost like moving around the room trying to slowly understand what's going on. So yeah, I think perspective is a really good maybe thematic device that's used for this little section. It's carrying quite a lot of weight. I think that's like a really exciting thing of me going back and looking at it and playing through it, is this seems like a bit of a throwaway scene, but like when you dive into it and start analyzing it, there's tons of stuff going on in this little section. It's great.
Exactly. I love how the developers actually use perspective and like how you're interacting with the game, and even like how scenes work. We were talking about the TV and the static that they use to sometimes cut with Cloud's visions. But that brings me to another point, because I noticed as Cloud wakes up, as you know, Zach offers to get Biggs back, we switch back to Cloud, and Cloud wakes up, but we hear Zach, his voice, repeat his last line again to Marlene, but now from the perspective of Cloud hearing it. And then I was like, wait a second, did Cloud also, as he was falling asleep, hear Zach? Because when you hear Zach in that switch to this, the section we just played, you actually see question marks because it's like Cloud doesn't know who's talking. And then it switches to that weird, perspective of Zach moving around the room. So is now Cloud, the main perspective Cloud, hearing or aware of what's happening in this other timeline?
What was he even having? Like, was he having a vision while he was sleeping? Like, that's what I'm assuming, at least, or he's dreaming this scenario and then waking up from it. That's how I felt it was portrayed, but I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Yeah, I sort of ended up along the same lines, which is, okay, these two have a connection in some capacity. Like, we don't know what is that telepathically, is that like time zone, like what on earth is going on here. So, but yeah, I think it's a very poignant moment because is it the first time in gameplay that you get this, like this crossover between the two worlds, like the voiceover you're hearing in one character's head from the other sequence. So yeah, it's cool that it happens here.
Yeah.
Horcrux. It's a Horcrux.
Well, you know what? We're going to have to dive into that later in segment 3 because someone shows up from your party. They knock on the door. For me, it was Tifa. Who did you get, Nick?
Oh, it was Tifa. I listen, I got my relationship with Tifa on lock right now, okay? I'm getting all those answers right so that she's number 1.
Simon, who did you get?
I got Aerith. Fairly unsurprisingly. I think this is great because it's like a really interesting point in the game and like in the storyline of what is the game trying to tell you to do, or like in the storyline, what are you supposed to do here, quote unquote? What are you supposed to do? And for me, I thought I was supposed to like have my friendship higher with Aerith, just considering I wanted to sort of know more about what that storyline was going to unfold. So it's kind of interesting that you both had Tifa, because I think that makes sense as well in terms of your reading on it.
Yeah, well, we were just playing it because we loved Tifa. So everything for our relationship with Tifa was all about her. So yes, the person that you were close, or the character that you're closest with, that's the person that will show up at Cloud's door. And they decide to move around the Golden Saucer where you could play some mini games. It's a fun time. Go explore that. There is one part I just wanted to briefly touch on because while going around the Golden Saucer, they see a photo of Jessie, who we know in Remake lost her life. And you hear how much Jessie meant to Tifa. So it was just interesting. We just heard about Biggs, and now we're getting these reminders from Remake as well. But then we also cut to Barrett as he is investigating a mysterious gunman. And this is interesting because you have him, there's a few cutscenes with Barrett to this point. You have him hang around Golden Saucer, and then he sees a security personnel unconscious. And it seems like this person, as he's following him into, or as this person that like hurt the security officer is getting away, it seems like he has a gun arm. So that's very confusing because there's only one person I know that has a gun arm, and that is our man Barrett. So obviously making Barrett a bit curious as well. And then we go to Cloud and whoever you are with that knocked on your door. And if you're at Skywheel, they try to go to the Skywheel, but it is broken. And this is a really cute moment for my inner ship of Cloud and Tifa because they hold hands. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cute. And guess who arrives? Kate Sith shows up and is like, hey, guess what, Cloud? There was a shooting that happened, and it looks like that the suspect has a gun arm and wears glasses, so he's hinting that it may be Barrett. So both your party member and Cloud go to check out what's going on.
And so we have no image of their face. But according to eyewitness reports, it was a man with a gun grafted to one arm. And that's when it hit me. I knew this man. He was one of several fugitives we were warned to be on the lookout for. nigh as tall and muscular as I, yet brash and brazen, with an ever-present scowl that smolders behind his sunglasses, and a gun for an arm. Tell me, does that sound like anyone you might know?
Now wait a minute. Barrett might have a temper, but he'd never do this.
Though I'd like nothing more than to believe you. This tells a very different tale.
No, we...
Listen, this couldn't have been Barrett.
And what makes you say that?
The cameras. It's not his style to avoid the limelight. If he really did kill all these people, he would have had a damn good reason. One that he'd want the world to know about. He'd have made sure you had the footage. Trust me.
Well, you do not want for loyalty, which is a quality close to my heart. But this is a serious matter. Mere character statements will not suffice. I'll tell you what. Find me the true perpetrator, and I will declare your friend innocent. You have 24 hours, after which you will all be deemed complicit, clapped in chains, and delivered to Shinra.
So it looks like it's time for Cloud and the crew to put on their Sherlock hats because we have a murder mystery to solve. Was it Barrett in the battle square with a metal gun arm? Well, we'll have to see because the party only has 24 hours to find out what happens, as Dio is not thinking that Barrett is so innocent as well. So we find out that Barrett's actually taken away to the prison, and Kesa decides to actually help guide us to find Barrett. So we head into the prison. There, when we get down there, Cloud gets knocked out by someone. It happens very quickly because we learn from Kate Sith heading towards the prison. There is something called Desert Bowl?
Dust Bowl.
Desert Bowl. Dust Bowl. I'm like, Desert Bowl, Dust Bowl. Yeah, we as you're heading down to the prison, Kate Sith tells us about the Dust Bowl. That is pretty much this place where it got really rough for all the workers, and it's pretty much like no rules in there, which is really weird that is so close to the Golden Saucer. Not really believable, but hey, we're moving the story along. I get what they're trying to do. So when Cloud gets knocked out, he wakes up and he finds out that one of the henchmen that are in this area knocked him out to bring him to his boss, Gus. We meet this guy in this, it's like a green, is it teal? I think it's like a greenish hue suit. Very JoJo Bizarre-ish of his whole look and demeanor. He's very eclectic. And it looks like he's kind of the boss of this area, the Dust Bowl. And he says that he actually has Barrett, but he wants to he's willing to exchange Barrett for Cloud racing in this chocobo race that's going to make Gus a lot of money. I am tired with these side missions, guys.
Yeah. I mean, one, it feels jarring after, playing all those mini games in the Gold Saucer. You're dealing with your relationships, everything. I don't know, to just go to a 180 of, oh, well, we think Barrett has murdered these people. I kind of wasn't really following along this story point. I was kind of confused as we were going along, not understanding what was happening in the moment because my mind was still on the Gold Saucer. And I'm like, wait, are we leaving the Gold Saucer? Why? Oh, Barrett might have murdered a bunch of people. Oh, okay. But now he's captured? Oh, now we got to rescue him? Like, everything happened so fast that I wasn't really computing with what was happening.
I should take a second here. In my notes, I have, "This is how you introduce a character!" ! In large letters. The introduction of Gus is just so good. I just wanted to shout it out quickly because he kicks the door open, comes through and the Gus funk starts playing off the soundtrack, and it has that, I don't know what, it's like a slapping bass line to it. It's just such a cool piece of music, and like he's delivering all this exposition and stuff to Cloud and the group, and all of his henchmen are doing the backing hype man style vocals to it. It's so funny, it's so weird, and it's just like hilarious, this scene. So I didn't want to miss this one. I love Gus as a character. It's really fun.
It is so weird how they fit these moments in these characters that, again, Gus really reminds me of someone out of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, like just how he talks, how the music even is very, I feel like, inspired by that. You could pull inspirations from that as well. But as you decide to help out Gus, because we want Barrett back, Gus actually separates Cloud from the rest of the party. So we find out that in order to race in this Chocobo Cup, in order to get Gus's money and to get Barrett back, we have to actually help this Chocobo. And it turns out that the Chocobo is a Chocobo we know and is dear to us. It's Pico. Pico was actually captured here, and Billy was captured as well. So along with Billy's help, who also I was not a fan of when I met Billy, it just screamed too much. But with Billy's help, we actually have to get Pico's health up because he's not doing so good after being captured. So you have to get these greens, and you can do that through various ways. But from there, once you get that, you actually compete in the Chocobo Cup, and you meet Joe, who is Sam's jockey. This is interesting because we know Billy does not like Sam, and we know a little bit about that story, but we don't know how deep it goes. And I just met Joe from the start, and I'm like, I don't like you already. And now I'm starting not to like Sam. I'm also a diehard Sam. Like, I love Sam. I find him so mysterious and cool, but maybe I don't anymore. It had me questioning my thoughts, Nick.
I mean, Chocobo Sam's an evil guy, isn't he? And a con artist. So,
or is he just surviving in a harsh world, right?
I think you just like the bad boys is what is usually the case, i.e. Sephiroth.
Maybe. But we do compete in this Chocobo race. This is actually pretty fun. This is, another minigame type experience. I love minigames. I love horse riding games, stuff like that. It's fun. You're gonna have a good time. But you also see Palmer and Rude in the lounge watching the Chocobo Cup, and I wanted to barf because Palmer is flirting with the ladies.
Yeah, it's so creepy.
So creepy.
Also, isn't this Chocobo game basically straight up rip of Mario Kart? It's pretty close, right?
It's pretty close. You may be onto something.
This bit's really funny as well. You have
something.
Rude and Elena having the back and forth with each other on the other side of the desert, and Rude has the ringtone.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I love the ringtones in this game are always like, the tunes that we remember from Final Fantasy. Yeah. So I love how they chime that in. But yes, this moment between Rude and Elena just cannot catch a break because she is stuck in the Dust Bowl, walking around in her all black uniform in the heat, like complaining that she may die of heat stroke. And Rude looks like he is gonna die of like being annoyed by Palmer and him flirting with the ladies. So it's interesting you have this dynamic here.
I love the end of that sequence where Rude asks Elena if she wants some ice cream, and her response is not vanilla, and the call just ends. It's so like, why? But sure, okay. It's very funny.
What do you think Elena's like ice cream flavor of choice is? What kind? Because I would have pegged her for more of a vanilla flavored person. She wants just things as they're supposed to be in her mind, She's a Turk. She does things by the book, right? Like she's got the full suit on. Vanilla does make sense. Let's go like vanilla adjacent. How about like a mint choc chip? So like she's slightly more adventurous, but not too much. Yeah.
Her personality is out there, right? She doesn't seem like a traditional Turk. Like Rude is very much like he just cool, calm, collected, and she's always panic mode.
Yeah.
So I'd go with like chocolate swirl. Mm-hmm. Like she's got the layers of chocolate and mixed in with the vanilla.
Well, Rude, take notes because that's the type of ice cream you should get, Elena. Well, after the Chocobo Cup race, it's time to see Gus.
I knew I backed a winner. You're the real deal, kiddo. I just provided the encouragement. And thanks to you, my prison's gonna be a goddamn palace.
Good for you.
Ooh, so frosty. But here in the desert, we like it hot, fiery, dangerous.
Yeah, I'll bet. Now where's our guy?
Easy, Snowflake. Solemn Gus is a man of his word. Are you scared I'll break my promise? That tunnel over there will take you where you need to go. Past all that quicksand like a slippery little sidewinder. And at the other end, one of my beautiful vultures will be waiting to guide you through the desert. So be a good tourist. We got old Shooty McShooterson tied up nice and tight in a shack out in the scrapyard. But now he's all yours. Turn him over. Give him his just desserts. It's your call to make.
All right. At least Gus is an honest guy. He kept his word, kind of, because we also have to now find Barrett, which is like, if you had Barrett, just bring Barrett to us. Why are we now going on this long ordeal to find him? And that long ordeal includes going through the desert. So it's not even like a simple route. We could like I don't get it, Nick.
I'll take it only because, like you said, I didn't pay Gus to kind of help us. Like, if we did what he wanted, I felt like there was going to be another thing that he was going to try to get us to do. But he kind of was, he kept his word, even though we do have to do this. It's not like he, took us for a spin.
But they're doing a little bit of subversion here, right, with Gus, because I think Gus is talking about the character that we'll come on to in a second that they have tied up. Whatever that Shooty McShooterton, whatever he says and calls him. So I think the player is meant to think that it's Barrett, but I think Gus is talking about this other person that we'll talk about in a second. So they kind of just do a little bit of subversion, a bit of red herring there, and I think it's kind of effective here as well, because you're like, okay, we've finally caught up with Barrett, and then they throw another thing at you.
Exactly. And it's like when you get to this point, right? So we're going through the desert. There's a few fights along the way. The crew is trying to find Barrett, but come across a random tornado, and this kind of or like sandstorm. And I was worried because I was like, this is kind of like the end of Remake, how those tornadoes showed up. Like, what's happening here? But no, it's just your average day sand tornado. And through it, we find Barrett, but I don't, like you said, I don't think that's who we were supposed to find, because we learn that Barrett's actually looking for the person that he thinks was the suspect in the events at the Coliseum, where that security guard got hurt and a few other people got hurt as well. And he believes it's his friend, his best friend, Dine. And Dine is very much like a mirror of Barrett as well, because Dine, is his best friend, and we actually learn a little bit more of the backstory behind Dine and Barrett, and it goes into this cutscene where we see Barrett's past, a younger Barrett, and this is when they come across the mako reactor in their town burning or exploding. And we find Dine and Barrett that they're surprised about the events that are happening because, again, remember, Barrett is the one who helped convince the town to let Shinra come in and help Mount Corral and the citizens there. And then we learn that, wow, this mako reactor actually exploded, a classic Shinra, and that they're shooting the people in the town to cover up the fact that the reactor blew up. Because, Nick, we asked, why would they kill the people? It makes no sense. Before, last episode, we were like, it makes no sense why they would kill the people. It's to cover up their mistakes.
I always thought in my head that Shinra weren't that bad. Like, until this scene where you think, okay, one, they convinced a town to give up their town to build a reactor. Then they frame, I guess, burning it down to the ground on the people of the town, and then kill them in the process, and like shoot down the mayor, whatever it is. They are just despicable people. But also in the back of my head, all I kept thinking watching all of these cutscenes is, how did Barrett and Dine both get gun for arms? That's all I wanted to know, how they both had their arms taken off for this, because it is a very specific thing that they have.
And we learned it happened because when the troops from Shinra appear, they kill the mayor, and the mayor like exposes partly what Shinra's doing, that they're trying to cover everything up. And then as Dine is about to fall off a cliff, Barrett holds him, and Scarlet shows up. Scarlet, remember what Yuffie said? That B word, right? She shows up and shoots them, but aims at their arms. So then all of the, like, Dine ends up falling to his death, or so we thought. And Barrett ends up losing his arm because of that. It was so damaged.
Yeah, Scarlet is a monster. That's what I had written in my notes. She says Shinra has a reputation for safety to uphold, which makes you liabilities, as she's shooting their arms off. Like, it's awful. This is a character with no redeeming qualities about her at all.
And she doesn't have to do the shooting because the troops are there with the gun. She grabs a gun from one of the troops. Like, she's having fun with this. Like, that's the thing, Nick. Like, I didn't realize how bad Shinra was till playing this. And I'm like, holy crap, that's horrible. So yeah, we find out Dine is Marlene's dad, and that's how he died, and how Barrett got his arm. And, well, Jesus, like, I can't even get over it. But anyways, as we go back to what's happening now, we see that Barrett continues to express that's why he thinks that Dine is the one who shot him, because he saw the gun arm, and Cloud kind of puts two and two together, thinking that Dine had the same, idea to put a gun on his arm as Barrett did, because their arms were too damaged. And from there, we push forward and we find Dine actually tied up, and it's Barrett that finds Dine because Barrett decides that he wants to go alone. So the party is just a solo one right now, and Dine is not how he was in those cutscenes. He is not himself. He is delusional. He is seeing his wife. He's talking to Marlene. He thinks it's his wife's birthday, and they're obviously not there. This must have been breaking for Barrett to see.
It's a really, really sad sequence, isn't it? Because you come off chapter 7 where you see Barrett and dealing with the grief and the trauma of his decision making, what happened in his hometown. And then you combine that with his best friend being, in his head, his best friend being dead, only to find him being alive here. And then him being completely delusional, and what the sequence of events which unfolds after this. It's a difficult watch. I think, like, at its core, it is Barrett's story, right? Like, this is Barrett's emotional arc and the journey that he's going on. I think I had him written in my notes. Yeah, Barrett's going to need a lot of therapy for this one. So that's kind of that's where my head was at.
Well, there was already a red chair in the room that Dine was in. I'm like, you might as well just lie on that, Barrett, because you're going to need a therapist.
The amount of trauma that he's gone through.
Yeah.
Like, his whole town hates him. He blames himself for what happened to the town people. And then his best friend died. He basically adopted his child, right? And this guy's clearly not well. And he's still trying to hold on hope that Dine is kind of still in there, that his best friend's still there. And it's really heartbreaking to see.
Yeah. Well, Dine was tied up because of Gus, thinking that was the suspect, what you talked about, Simon. We thought it was Barrett, but it was actually Gus that Dine had. And as Barrett is loosening the ties, he helps him out and goes towards the party. But as soon as Dine sees Cloud in the soldier outfit, he is not happy. He says specifically, what is his kind doing here? You're still living off that shit of Shinra's Gil. And he's saying this to Barrett. So obviously the trauma for Dine is definitely there as well. And this triggers a boss fight between Dine and Barrett. This was a tough one. The electricity, tough. The lasers, tough. Did not like this.
I think the main way around it the most is to hide behind rocks, right? You gotta get away from his bullets and then use your opportunities to shoot him down. But he can destroy some of those rocks as well. I just found an emotional level. This was a heartbreaking fight to have. I honestly truly felt horrible for Barrett in this situation, and it's a cool little. I just like how everyone's having their moment in this game, and Barrett's story is incredible. But then you also get a boss fight where it's just him. I like the fact that it's not the whole party, and you kind of have to deal with him on your own. It's a cool little thing that I really enjoy.
I agree. I think there's some interesting stuff from gameplay mechanic standpoint as well. Just how Barrett moves is just so much more weighty than Cloud is and any of the other party. So they're trying to force you into almost hand-to-hand combat. Like they're not allowing you to run away. So narratively and gameplay-wise, they're working together here to try and force you into that confrontation. I think it's really successful. I really like this fight. It's bloody difficult. It's one of the hardest fights that you have so far in the game. And I think that is testament because it is one-on-one, but it really worked for me.
Yeah, and I think it's also because it is such a hard story to swallow. Barrett fighting his friend, his own little mirror fight. Well, after this fight, I cry.
After everything went down, I didn't know what to do. Myrna was dead, and I figured you were too. All I had was guilt and regret, and the weight of it was too much. But Marlene gave me the strength to carry on. She nearly died that day. House was about to come down when I heard her crying. And ever since, she's been my reason to get up in the morning.
You took my baby girl from me. You knew she meant the world to me. You knew, and still you took her.
That's not true.
You took everything from me. Everything and everyone.
Diane, we could go see Marlene right now.
Look at me, Barrett. You think I want Marlene to see what her father's become?
Stop!
With all this goddamn blood on my hands, how could I ever hold my daughter again?
So there's no words for what's happening here. Like I said, I was just crying at this whole scene. I feel so bad for Barrett as he's seeing his friend that he thought he could save now just dying. And we never seen Barrett this vulnerable throughout the two games so far.
It's not just, I don't know, what I felt the most sad for was obviously Barrett, but Marlene, and especially like dying, kind of getting to his senses, but like he's just like, I can't let Marlene see me like this. Like it was so heartbreaking. And then Barrett breaking down while Dyne dies, and he's like on top of him. He's one of his only, really like the only person who has been able to deal with the experience that Barrett can tell all of his friends what happened in Mount Corral, but only a certain few understand, or if they don't hate him, like they've gone through that path, and Dyne is one of them. To see his best friend die in that way was heartbreaking. But again, he has that redemption arc at the end. We don't really know much about him, but by the end of this cutscene, like he tries to help out. So you do feel good that it wasn't just like him going crazy and trying to kill Barrett. He kind of snaps back into his senses. So it's a little heartwarming, even though it is pretty sad.
I think this whole scene is really well written. I think it's, if you're ever asking the question about whether video games can stand up on their own merits when it comes to narrative and writing, I think this is exceptionally well written. The layers all the themes that are going on here, the way that these two characters are written, I think is really, really, it's just well executed and well done. I think the line that really sticks with me, because it's really the thematic summarization of Barrett's whole journey, is all I had was guilt and regret, and the weight of it was too much. And you're just like, wow, that's him in a nutshell. That's his journey. And like, even though like that's coming to an end slightly here, it stays with you. It's going to stick with you forever. Like, it's just because this thing kind of comes to an end, it doesn't mean it's going to end in terms of how it affects you.
And it does, sticking with him forever. That's something that Dine also echoes, right? He says, carry it with you, right? And he's talking about that guilt, which is, it's kind of like a hard line, because it's not like a pretty, even at the end of it, you do have that resolve or like a little bit of peace for Dine, because you see him being joined with his wife through that vision he has. It's not obviously the perfect ending, but it's not, it doesn't make you feel that great after. Like, you still feel horrible because you hear Dine. Like, I don't think he was fully in the forgiveness for Barrett, even though he's willing to sacrifice his life for Barrett. He didn't fully forgive Barrett. And that's why I love this scene as well, because it's so complex. There's so many emotions, so many layers, and it's not made to make any character look perfect in this scene. Really, really well done. But obviously, as the tears are flowing, the Turks show up to ruin that. They arrive, and they have this huge machine. Oh, it just completely ruined. Like, it ruined. Like, I didn't have time to process the emotions, because this just happened right after. We see Elena in the helicopter, and she launches Palmer's Anuran suppressor, which is this huge machine. I'm like, great, another boss battle. I don't want to do this as well. How'd you guys find this fight?
So I think there are a lot of things that I love about this game, and there's a lot of things I love about this chapter. This didn't work for me, and I think this has actually been called out a bit. I'm not the first person to make this point, but I'll, why not? I'll go with it for the time being. It felt like this moment needed a beat. It really felt like it needed breathing room to just have this sort of dropped on you. You have this such weighty moment, and it feels a bit MCU of like, we need to throw a joke in here. Like, we don't trust the audience enough to swallow this emotional weight that's come with it. At the same time, I kind of understand why this happens, simply because you do have this whole arc, which is about a chase sequence, and they finally catch up with you with the moment where like that arc has been completed. So they drop the thing on top of you. So it made sense on the whiteboard in terms of how you would write this stuff up. I just don't think it works in reality. I find it a bit too much.
Especially with how creepy Palmer is. Like, again, you're just trying to process everything that you just saw. And it's like, oh no, here you go. Not only Palmer fight, then you get, I don't know. It was way too much. It was like sensory overload for me at this point.
Well, I think for me as well, I was tired of the machine battles. Like, we just had like a really like heavy fight between two friends that, this fight between Sephiroth and Cloud keeps being teased to us. It's like, I actually enjoyed not fighting a mech and not fighting a machine, right? So it was a great break to then just be thrown into fighting a machine again. It kind of felt like it did a disservice here as well. But we do have to do it. And once you do beat the suppressor, guess who arrives? Dio. What was Dio doing, and how did Dio find us in the middle of the Dust Bowl? I have no idea, but he shows up with this pretty cool Jeep truck thing that's as eclectic as he is, and Barrett is obviously still hurt, but he realizes at that point when Dio shows up and they start to escape onto this truck that I think he starts to process as we're trying to process. He processes what happens with Dine, and he hears Dine's words again about carrying that guilt with him. And I'm wondering, how do you think that last word from his friend sat with him? Like, what does Barrett take from that now? Because we hear Cloud try to reassure him that he's not alone on this path. But what does that really mean for Barrett?
That is such a difficult question to answer. That is a great question. I think he thinks he's I think he thinks he's at fault for a lot of things, right? I think in this moment, I think it's just a reinforcement of that. And I think he comes to a conclusion in that Marlene is still important to him, right? Like that Marlene is the thing that keeps him going. I think he says something like that in the script, that like she was all I had and like I have to keep going. So he recognizes the mission that he is on. And I think it's kind of all of those things converging on this one moment where he recognizes how awful Shinra are. He recognizes the mission of Avalanche, buttressed against this, this small girl that he has to take, that he's responsible for, and his best friend has just died. So he has all of these things converging at the same time. So I think that guilt it just sticks with him, but it's how that guilt is, how he uses it and how it moves forward, because it's clearly a catalyst for what comes in later on in the game.
Is he even able to this is a lot for him to swallow. Not only swallow, but how is he processing this in general? Because he already felt like everyone was against him in Mount Corral, and now everything that happened with Dine. Did he really learn to move past it, or is he just swallowing it?
Yeah, I mean...
See, I wouldn't say he's swallowing it, though, because we do see him also say it's time that Marlene knows. And I think for me, that was my interpretation of like how he saw those final words from his best friend, was that, the guilt, before we knew everything that was going on with Barrett, we never really understood anything about him. He always kept his true identity, his backstory so close to him. And I think what he takes away from it is that, especially to the people that are so close to that, like Marlene, he can't hide it. He has to be more transparent about it.
I think there's some really good stuff here as well of like, I don't know what the hell, like some textual painting, I guess, because like previously you have the found family like idea on the outside of the fence, like literally they're not allowed in gameplay, and this is the first moment where they're actually gathered around the body together. So you sort of have that thematic idea of a found family here as well. So yes, like it's a clearly heavy moment for him, but it is the first time that he's gathered around the body with the rest of the group as well. So there's some cool stuff going on there. The kind of stuff that I can't write, I can just analyze.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, you know what? I can't write it either, but I could have fun in this dark time with Barrett, which you end up doing because there's this chase sequence as the Turks show up. We have Elena and we have Rude actually show up, and they send their troops over to chase the truck, Dio's truck, who lets us escape because now he knows that Barrett is innocent. So as you're going through, it's like where you use Barrett, which obviously just is processing this trauma, now has to shoot at the back of this truck all these troopers that are going or chasing after them as they try to escape. And then poor Elena, she I think Tifa hits the brakes, and then Elena crashes into a rock or something and gets flown in the air. It's definitely like a Team Rocket moment where I'm like, Elena just again cannot catch a break. But from there, we actually go into another scene that was very unexpected. We see Reeves, who is, of course, on the board at Shinra, and he's in the Shinra building changing the warrants for Tifa and Barrett and Cloud and changing the pictures on them to appear as other people. Is he trying to help them? But more interesting, we see Keith Sith sitting at the back of his office on a desk.
Wait,
what is going on?
I didn't notice that.
You didn't?
No.
Yes.
So is this the past or is this present?
This is present, but is it the past? I don't know.
I mean, I loved him changing. They all look kind of the same but different, which is funny. And we all know that Reeves is a good guy. Like, he's the one guy in Shinra that I trust based on all the cutscenes we've seen. Yeah.
That's what I thought until Sung makes an appearance in this. And we hear kind of like the clicking of Reeves because it's a secretary that appears in his office first. So like walks into his office and then Sung. And we hear the clicking like maybe he's exiting out of the windows that he's on. So the secretary doesn't know what he's doing. But then Sung says, "Don't have too much fun," which I was like, who's who in this game? Like, does Sung know what Reeves is doing?
I assumed that he didn't know, but honestly, they could be connected too, because Sung has done some questionable things in terms of helping us a little bit. throughout.
Right.
That's a good
This
point.
is such a more questions than answers kind of scene where this happens.
Exactly.
Like you get the narrative conclusion with him changing the wanted poster, so we get that resolution from the start of the chapter. But at the same time, I'm with Nick as well on this one. Like, first playthrough, if you don't catch this moment because it's so brief of seeing Kate Sith on the shelf, then it makes it very challenging for the second half of the game. I had this thought the first time that I played through the game, which is I felt like this scene actually needed to be a bit more heavy-handed in terms of like making that direct connection between the two of them, between Kate Sith and Reeve, because it's so brief and it's so like fleeting that if you don't catch it, it'll be gone.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys told me, so now I'll know in the second half of the game that Simon says. Okay.
Yeah, it's there. But after that, we see that Sung actually goes to talk to Rufus. And Rufus is interested in Aerith again, which I'm like, didn't Reeves just change these wanted posters? I thought Rufus was over this. Like, what is happening? But again, Rufus echoes his father, which is weird because he's very careful not to do what his father wants. And he says he's more curious about Aerith's birthright. But I'm like, wasn't that just what your father wanted? So aren't you just doing exactly what your father wanted? It makes no sense. They keep going back and forth. I want answers.
These are really difficult scenes, I think, to first time playthrough of where we are in the story. Obviously, like, they unpack it in the second half of the story, but like first time playthrough, these are hard. Like, these are really, really difficult. Like, who the hell is Glenn? Like, what on earth is his his connection to Rufus? How does he just show up? How is he using the robed man's body? Like, all of this kind of stuff. It's just, again, it's another scene. I know what it's trying to do. It's like trying to provoke you to think about what's going on in the story, and it's trying to prompt a bunch of questions to you. I was quite confused here. It didn't, like, especially at the back end of a very heavy chapter, there's a lot of things they're trying to pack in here, and it didn't quite work for me.
Yeah, I feel like here's something where it's like, this could have waited another chapter, or like, just maybe we didn't need all these clues in here as well. But you're right, Glenn does arrive, and we hear, he's mocking Rufus. But more interesting in this interaction between Glenn and Rufus is Rufus ask him who he really is. Because before we heard Rufus say that, I know who you are. He sees that vision of him shooting Glenn in the head. So is this not the same Glenn and why is he wearing the robes? Again, more questions than answers.
Especially with his name Glenn. And there's no...
Two N's as well, right?
I don't know who this guy is.
I think it's Glenn with two N's, which
yeah.
like, why? Okay, sure.
Yeah. If you want to be special, Glenn, yeah, sure. Go right ahead. But after this moment, we then switch back to Zach. And Zach is trying to find Biggs. And that is where this chapter ends, in Sector 5 slums in that moment. After the break, we're going to deep dive a little bit more into the mystery of this chapter and get our final thoughts. So this chapter reminds us of the losses of the past. Let's talk about, Dine. I think we kind of put a pretty good understanding of like what happened with Dine and Barrett. Barrett decides that he's going to tell Marlene the truth at the end of this chapter. Do you think that's going to end well? Is that the right choice? Is Marlene too young?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think I'd tell Marlene. Especially the way, the way everything went down with Dine and how young Marlene is. I would maybe wait until she's much older to explain who her father was.
Yeah, I think that's a question that I'd want to ask some professional help and what the right age is to tell a young child about whether they're adopted. I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure as hell that Barrett doesn't know the answer to that either.
Yeah, like, and that's, I don't know, man. I don't think it's the right, well, and like, maybe it is the right time to tell Marlene that she's adopted, but maybe not the right time to tell her about the tragic history of her father's death and how Barrett actually was closer to that than she might have initially thought. I think that could be very traumatizing, especially with Barrett, who's still trying to figure that out himself, like dealing with this trauma of like how he moves forward. I think he needs to figure it out before he tells Marlene the truth. Now, we did see a few scenes from Zach. Still not quite sure what is happening there at this point. But I do love the fact that we're going to see some sort of interaction with Biggs. And I'm wondering, is Jesse alive in this universe? Like, what is happening? Who else is alive?
I think they're dead, right? They're supposed to be dead.
I don't know. Like, I know the poster, but are they? Like, there's so many questions flying in the air. I'm just kind of like, what does this mean? Are they going to bring is there a third timeline? Like, I have no idea.
Now I'm nervous because Simon's played this multiple times. We're kind of going through it the first time here. What the hell have we missed through some of these cutscenes? Like, Simon's just been on one episode, and he's already blown my mind a couple times. So I'm really afraid. But Simon, I don't know how you feel up to this point, but we're halfway through the game, and there has been very little answers so far.
Yeah, which I think is in some ways is good storytelling, right? You want to try and push the player to keep going forward. So you want to try and keep giving them questions, but you do have to pay it off eventually. Like you have to give them something to sort of, give some concrete answers somewhere and stop leaving it up to mystery. The Zach stuff in this one, I think, is really kind of, I know why it's in here. I guess peek behind the curtain. You know why it's in here because it's trying to do parallels to the storyline that's going on with Barrett. It is a bit weird though, and it is like so like there's not a lot of teeth in it, I guess, in this chapter. And I think you're right to have questions here because it seems very fair to me that you would have a bunch of stuff and no solutions here.
Yeah, it's now when I see Zach, like it's honestly to the point where it's like I've seen Zach enough. Like if we don't need Zach to actually tell us more about what's going on, I don't want to see Zach. You know, it's at that point because it's just like it's the teases. This is how they're teasing us, like, oh, we're gonna give you something, but not everything. So that's kind of where I stand with Zach. I do want to just quickly double back to Kate's last fortune that Cloud could, find Sephiroth essentially, but he was going to have to lose the thing that he most cherishes. I believe that maybe it depends, like maybe in these universes, maybe not with this game, there's multiple endings, but maybe in these universes, how they're trying to tell us is like, there are multiple ways to end the story. If you're a fan of the other one or of the original, maybe the loss of Aerith doesn't need to happen, but maybe there's the loss of someone else that needs to happen to replace that. But then again, in Zach's timeline, we see now both Zach and Cloud survive. So I don't know.
I think that is such an interesting question of who is the person or what is the thing that fortune is trying to read? Because I think the game wants you to go in the direction of like it's a playable character or something. I think my original play through it, and this is a little bit tainted by me playing the original one as well, is I was wondering whether they were trying to sort of hit on the message of the planet. Like you were going to have to lose the.
Oh, like with the meteor.
Like you have to because it's so the planet's alive, right? The live stream is this big part about it. So it's. I wonder whether they were trying to hit on that as well in that particular moment.
Yeah, I don't know. But there's, like you said, there's lots of questions up in the air. I want to first thank you so much for joining us here today. Where can everyone find you on socials if they want to see what you're doing and all your thoughts?
Well, unfortunately for everyone, you can't actually find me on social media anywhere. I have wiped everything to do with it, but I should take the opportunity to plug Open Era. It's a tennis podcast hosted by myself and Devang Desai, who's excellent. He's a fantastic sports journalist. I would recommend that everyone checks it out. You can find that at Open Era Pod, where you can hear me speak about tennis every week. So if that floats your boat, then head on over there for that one.
Yeah, get your sports fix over there. For us here at AutoSave, next week on the show, we continue our road trip to Gongaga Village, and it's going to be a good one, but you're going to have to stick around and listen right here on AutoSave. AutoSave is produced and hosted by Nick Andrade and myself, Camille Salazar-Hadaway. The show is also produced by Dylan Wilson. Gameplay and additional elements provided by Chris Zeiser. Technical production by Greg Fillion. Executive producer Clayton Hansler. You can follow the show at AutoSave Podcast on Twitter and AutoSave Pod on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch. You can subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it right now. And if it happens to be Apple Podcast, kindly leave us a rating and a review, but only if it's good. AutoSave is a Soda original hosted on the Soda Podcast Network.